Hi everyone, Michael Rubenfeld here, recording from Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I was born, and the handsome fellow sitting next to me is my father. Are you gonna wear your glasses? Do you want to wear your glasses for the whole time? You want to take them off? Because you're gonna get glare in your glasses. You can keep them on if you want. What would you prefer?
Doesn't matter.
All right. Now that we've got that settled.
Hello.
Hello. I'm taking this opportunity to do an interview with my father. This is the second interview that I've done. The first one I did was with my friend Jonathan Garfinkel, and some of you might have seen that. And this time I've got my father. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Cary. I'm Michael's Canadian father.
As opposed to my Polish father, who's a completely other person. The reason that I wanted to interview my father was because I thought it might be interesting to have a conversation about your relationship to Poland and how it's evolved and why it's evolved for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people who watch what I make are Polish people, and a lot of my content's Polish Jewish stuff. And I have talked a lot in the past about my own journey, going from somebody who grew up not liking Poland, someone who grew up thinking that Poland was the asshole of the world, because that's what I was taught by, my family and my schooling and the Jews around me and survivors and everyone, to, of course, now living in Poland, which I do now. And I thought it might be fun to kind of talk about where you started in your relationship to Poland, or maybe you could talk about how you were raised, being a child of a Holocaust survivor, and what your relationship to Poland was or had been in your life, say, prior to you starting to come there because I was living there.
We are what's referred to as second-generation survivors, which means that our parents, grandparents, are first-generation or survivors of the Holocaust, and that's what they are. They're just survivors. The rest of our families were wiped out. At least from my late father's side. Many are of Polish origin, Polish descent, although they lived in southern France during the war.
When did they move to France? Do you remember that?
After the First World War, and when there were pogroms from the Russian Revolution. So it was to escape after the First World War. That's when my Zeta, or my late grandfather, made his way to another country. And my late father was born in 1925. And they lived in France until they emigrated to Canada starting in 1950.
And how did they survive?
They survived in hiding in southern France and Vichy France. They survived at the courtesy of French farmers and some partisans, French resistance, who my father was a member of, and different children. There were three, my father and his two sisters, and his mother and father, were placed with different French farmers or sympathetic to sympathetic to Jews and their persecution.
And their parents were immigrants from Poland.
Originally from Poland, yes.
Your great grandparents. Oh no, your grandparents.
My
Your
grandparents, right.
Yeah. Do you remember from where in Poland?
I was always told that they came from the area of Przemyśl,
Okay.
in eastern Poland.
From Przemyśl.
Some small village, some shtetl, that was near that district.
It's interesting because Przemyśl is like become very known now in Poland as like a hub for Ukrainian refugees. So I grew up hearing Przemyśl also. And so to hear that Przemyśl has become such an important first stop for Ukrainian refugees leaving Ukraine because of the war was very funny to have it recontextualized for myself in my brain.
My grandmother used to refer to it as Przemyśl.
Przemyśl? Was that the Yiddish name for it? I didn't know that.
I think so.
So that was a long time ago. And we grew up here in Winnipeg. And in terms of our relationship to Poland and what happened to the Jews there, the narrative we always held, I suppose, like in our minds and hearts, has always been quite negative, as had been our relationship to that part of the world. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, interesting. My grandparents would talk more about Vichy France, and my grandmother could never refer to the collaborationist Vichy government without referring to the Marshal and calling him Marshal Pétain. It was always referred to with a lot of disgust because he capitulated to the Germans after the invasion. And of course, he was tried and hung after the war for that reason. So I can't put my finger on direct family hatred of Poland, but I think it was just a community. There are a lot of survivors in this community who came as refugees or were sponsored here after the war from at various refugee camps. And it was just a known thing that the Poles were all anti-Semitic. Poland is a country that is just covered and flowing with Jewish blood. And it was where 3 million Jews were murdered, the greatest population of Jews in the world before the war. I never heard anything good about Poland, not even the times where things were good, and never heard about any of the welcoming stories or Poland welcomed Jews in past history, or what's the name of the Polish general?
Piłsudski?
Right.
Piłsudski.
How he was a friend of the Jews, and things were good for the Jews until he died, I think, in the mid 35, 36 is what I remember, what I've learned since.
It's funny, it feels to me a little bit like, in everything that I understand about like this history in Poland, it's like, it seems like from 35 on, like the things got so bad after Piłsudski's death that the narrative around anti-Semitism that we have gotten, that Jews have gotten about Poland, is this period between 35 and then the beginning of the war and then the war itself. And like you said, like you never heard anything good about Poland growing up. You only heard that Polish people were anti-Semitic. But at the same time, we know that that's not actually the case, because Piłsudski himself was a friend to the Jews. He was like, a big Polish name, a very important Polish person who was, right?
That is interesting because I know very little of the period from his death until 1939 when Poland was invaded. So I'm curious now what happened in those 4 years. My understanding was that there was a situation of gradually increasing anti-Semitism, native anti-Semitism among the Poles. And was that the case, or did it really emerge after the invasion?
Well, it was
September?
actually after Piłsudski's death. There was one particular political party that started to rise in power, and it was incredibly anti-Semitic, and it really fanned the flames and really encouraged the amount of anti-Semitism. They were really like encouraging people to want to get rid of the Jews after Piłsudski's death. So it was systemic in Poland. Of course, there was anti-Semitism that existed. This particular party, I feel like they were the Social Democrats or something like that in Poland, that were very, very anti-Semitic. They were very, very responsible for like things going south. I want to continue to talk about basically like at what point that narrative started to shift for you. And I remember I had this very like interesting moment with you. I don't know if you remember this moment when you met Magda for the first time. Magda, who's my wife. And we were having this kind of conversation. It was in Ottawa. I sort of surprised you with her. And, you had known that I was already going to Poland at that point. I don't think you even knew that I was dating a woman in Poland. But I surprised you, and we were in this conversation around Poland. Magda was telling you something that was negative happening in Poland. And you said to her, I don't know if you remember this, you said, "What's wrong with those people?"
I don't remember.
Yeah. And I just remember going like, oh my God. Because Magda's Polish. You basically asked her what was wrong with her without even, you were so angry about something. You had so much anger about Poland that you didn't realize that you like totally insulted her to her face. Like you couldn't like connect the fact that although Magda was Jewish, somehow I don't know, it was interesting, it was fascinating. But
Well, right from the start, I considered her one of us, a member of the tribe, so to speak. So it wouldn't have occurred to me to think that she'd be insulted as a Pole. Right? I've learned since that she's very nationalistic and very proud of her country.
I would say patriotic. I've used the word nationalism before, and I've had a lot of people yell at me. And I would say that Magda's patriotic, not nationalistic. Or, I don't know, she's not here, so I'm not going to speak for my wife, because I'll get in trouble. What I did recognize in you, in that moment, is that you seemed angry. You got angry very quickly. You had like anger. It felt like you were angry at Polish people. And I wonder if you can talk about your feelings, honestly, like, because obviously we're going to get to how they've shifted, but I think it's interesting that I feel like this hatred for Poland existed within us somehow. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes. And I had zero interest in visiting the country. I had zero interest in ever stepping foot in that country. And up until the time that you announced your wedding plans, I would have bet anything that will never be in Poland. There was no desire to be with Poles, Polish people. Basically, they were the same as the Germans. And to this day, I still can't get over what the Germans did to the Jewish people. It's irrational, but we don't buy. I personally don't buy German products. There's no good reason. I won't drive it. I won't own a German car, it's still right from every moment of my waking life I can remember what what's wrong with these people? Why have anything to do with Germans or Poles? And I saw them in the same basket, if you will.
And if you're a Polish person right now, I know you're getting angry. And I'm going to ask, why?
They were complicit. They were the henchmen. They were the ones who executed the Germans' orders willingly. And I knew of too many firsthand stories of members from our community, social circles, or even synagogue where so and so was what's the word, denounced by a Pole.
Right, or given up, right.
Given up by a Pole. And the same was true of Ukrainians, but that's what we're here to talk about.
Uh-huh. And is that a narrative that you still hold? Because, you know, a lot of Polish people are very upset at this idea that Poles are would be very upset hearing that you had classified Poles in the same basket as Germans, because from the Polish perspective, they were occupied. They were an occupied country. They didn't, as opposed to, say, the Vichy government, they didn't give up Jews willingly. They fought, and they formed an underground. The army was fighting underground. They were trying to protect Jews, and there are also a lot of Polish people who were trying to save Jews, and a lot of Polish people were murdered as a result of trying to save Jews.
You're right. Until I began traveling to Poland and speaking with Jews in Poland, and of course with you and our family, I didn't realize that it was actually 6 million Poles who were murdered. 3 million of them were non-Jewish. Mm. And that was an eye-opener to me. It didn't occur to me. And I didn't realize that there were laws that for hiding a Jew or not turning in a Jew, it would be the same thing for a Pole as for a Jewish person. Yeah. They would be instantly executed. So
why do you think that is? Why do you think that why did those laws exist, but why do you think we don't know any of these things? Why do you think that we only get these narratives of Poles being complicit, of Poles giving up Jews? Why do we hold so few narratives of the Poles trying to save Jews, or the Polish plight? How can we only have these negative narratives and stories that is shared with us?
Remember, this was a Holocaust survivor community. The majority of the Jewish people in this city were in fact survivors of work camps, concentration camps, hiding in forests, and the level of trauma within the community, and even more so within my family, our family, was off the charts. This was post-traumatic stress up until the day they died. There was no getting away from it. And much of it has been transmitted to the second and even the third generation. So the transgenerational transmission of stress is a known and researched thing, and we don't even have to say that we were lectured. If anything, to the contrary, most of our family, they were too deeply traumatized to even tell us about their wartime stories. In fact, my first wife, your mom, never heard of the stories from her mother and father. They couldn't talk about it, and to a certain extent, neither could my grandparents. Most of the stories are coming from their siblings, who have become educators in the community, Holocaust educators, going into the school system, the public school systems, teaching about it. So they made a point of researching what happened to the Jews in Europe in the war years.
You said that they couldn't talk about it, but yet at the same time, enough people talked about the negativity of Poles that somehow, you put the Poles in the same basket as the Germans, which we'll talk about how that has shifted for you. And I'm not saying, oh, you were doing a bad thing. I'm just more kind of curious as to how that narrative appeared, because how that narrative appeared, how we got so...
Why didn't it change?
Yeah.
Why hasn't it changed?
How did it happen to begin with? Because we clearly know now, it's great that you are saying, okay, we didn't have this information about the 6 million, 3 million non-Jewish Polish people, about the fact that Poles would be murdered if they were caught trying to save Jews, and many were. We just sort of blamed Poles for being as bad as Germans, which is so far from the truth. So I'm just curious as to how that narrative, or why that narrative actually exists. Yes, we know that some Polish people gave up Jews. My great-grandmother, my Baba's mother, was given up for a cup of sugar also. So this did happen. But why is that how did that turn into Jews hating Polish people so much?
There was no reason to stop hating. The remnants of the Jewish population was so small that there was nobody to speak for the Jewish people that survived, and many of them themselves had to leave, go to displaced person camps in other countries, and were absorbed by countries like Israel, USA, Canada, Australia. So it had continued right through indefinitely beyond 1968, which I understood was another difficult time. There were...
something else we didn't know anything about, right?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, your auntie and uncle, I didn't realize why they came, when they came in 68, 69.
Cool.
Wujek and Chocha.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Wujek and Chocha. But you know what Wujek and Chocha mean? Wujek just means uncle and auntie.
Auntie, yeah.
But which ones?
Right.
Until growing up, we had Wujek and Chocha, and I thought that was their names. I thought her name was Chocha, and Wujek. And no one actually explained that was just Polish for uncle. But you mean my Zeta Shimmick's sister?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, their sister.
Zeta, that's my mother's father. They were still living in Poland until
After the war.
Right?
We heard stories about clandestine trips to Poland, with prayer books being brought to the community and having to be very careful how they met people. That extended from Russia too, but prayer books or the prayer shawls or phylacteries being brought into Poland secretly by emissaries, and it was very bad for them if they were caught.
Really?
And meetings were held in very secret areas. So we heard more about this as a child growing up and going through Hebrew day school than almost the war, because this was happening as we spoke. This was current events as opposed to the past. And all we knew was it was very sad growing up as a child. So I would say that the formative years, our socialization years, played a big role in answering your question of why things haven't changed.
Because of communism and the flow of information out of Poland to the rest of the world, there weren't really people advocating for an alternative Polish narrative on behalf of like non-Jewish Polish people, right?
And that government was highly anti-Semitic.
Right.
Since the war.
I mean, people would say that it changed after Stalin, after Stalin's death, because there were a lot of Jews actually. It's very confusing because it was anti-Semitic, but at the same time, there were a lot of Jews in positions of power during Stalin's communist government. And then that started to change once Stalin died. And then communism started to change too, and anti-Semitism started to grow after Stalin's death. Okay, so this is all interesting. And so we have this narrative around Polish people, or I certainly had it as well, that Poles were anti-Semitic, betrayers of the Jews during the war. And then you hear, okay, Dad, I'm getting married in Poland. And everyone's got to come to Poland.
It started, you were getting married, and you were going to get married in Mexico. That's how it started.
It started in Mexico.
And I thought, that's great. You want to have a beach wedding? Count me in.
And then
That's fine.
And then we changed it to Poland.
No, you changed it to Vegas.
Right.
I can't, I'll never forget these. And I thought, okay, you want to have Elvis at your wedding? Viva Las Vegas. Let's go to Las Vegas and have the wedding there. And that lasted for about a week.
I actually forgot about this. And then when did Poland come? Then it was Poland next?
Then it was Poland.
Then it was Poland.
Wonderful, Mazel Tov, have a long life, good health, but I'm never stepping foot in that goddamn country.
Really? So when you heard, you were like, I'm not going to your wedding?
I'd never stepped, let me correct it. I actually said God-forsaken country.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you, at that point, had decided you weren't going to come to our wedding?
No, I'm not going to Poland.
Really?
Why go to Poland? It's the place, it's just running with Jewish blood on the streets.
Even though I was getting married there.
Right.
Which is kind of part of the reason why we decided to get married in Poland, because it would force you guys to have to come to Poland. Did you know that?
When I tell the story to my friends, I say, you were very clever about this. It was soft. You didn't push for it. You began saying, okay, we understand my position. And you let it go for a week, 10 days. And you said, we would really like to have you at our wedding. And it will be a Jewish wedding. Just come to the wedding. It's going to be just before Passover. And then you said something very interesting. You says, I'll even introduce you to someone, an observant Jew whose father was a Nazi commander, a German Nazi commander.
Oh, did I say that?
Yeah.
I don't know how that's a draw.
Well, that was like the hook. That's how could somebody be an observant Jew and their father be a German Nazi? What's the connection? How does that happen? So it was a hook. I was curious. You didn't pursue it. You let it go for a few more days, and we talked about it. And they said, well, it's his wedding. We'll come, and we'll have the wedding, and then we'll get the hell out of the country and go to Israel for Passover.
Okay.
And you understood. You said, okay, that's fine. You didn't push it. You were not aggressive. You were very careful with what you said. You didn't want to go against my wishes, because I would have fought you at the time. And then you the next time you brought it up, you said, look, we'll have a wonderful kosher. We found you a nice place. It's brand new. It'll be kosher for Passover.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be enjoyable. Come to us and have Passover with us. And we relented and we came. I was not looking forward to going to Poland at that point.
Okay.
Then you remember what happened?
No, tell me what happened.
We arrived.
Mm-hmm.
We were jet lagged. And all we wanted to do was sleep. And you said, hang on, before you go for sleep, I'd like you to come for a walk with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was come for a walk. And we went from the apartment up one block. The apartment was at the corner of Miadova and I forget, but very close to
I think it was like Moldova and Brzozova or something like that. I don't know.
Brzozova. Yeah, Brzozova, right. And we walked for a block, and you said, this is a Jewish cemetery. And I'm looking around, I thought, well, it's going to be ruins, it's going to be destroyed, it's going to be covered with blood. And we walked, and it was 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks, and this was a Jewish cemetery. I could peek inside the gates, and I could see Jewish gravestones that hadn't been toppled or covered with blood. And so I began thinking, what's going on here? Where am I? And then we turned the corner, and of course by then we were in Soroka Square, Soroka Square, and you began pointing out, and I'm seeing Jewish names on buildings, on restaurants, and they're not destroyed, they're not bombed. And all of a sudden, this is the first synagogue I remember seeing was the Ramu. And from my own education, I'd learned about the Ramah, Isserlis, and his synagogue is here, his grave is here, and it's not been destroyed. So at that point, it became, that was when I began questioning my own beliefs. And it was, we hadn't really gone in. I think we did go into the cemetery. We snuck in without paying the 10 zloty because I just pushed my way in. I went to see it, and I saw it. There was the tombstone, the grave. We refer to it as the Ohel of the great sage of modern Ashkenazi Judaism. And things just, I guess, I can't say went downhill from there, but they went crazier from there.
What do you mean? What do you mean by crazier?
Well, you pointed out we were staying 3 blocks from another synagogue, the Temple Synagogue, and across the street was another synagogue. And at the other corner was a Jewish community center. We had no idea any of these things existed. We didn't know that Kazimierz was the Jewish town and center of Krakow as well. Krakow was not destroyed because the Germans had intentions of putting their own Volksdeutsch into that country. And there's this gorgeous, beautiful, preserved medieval town that was home of so many Jews and still carries this strong memory and continuation of Jewish life. At that point, I met the observant, met Uwe and his wife Beata, who confirmed.
Not Beata, Uwe and Gabi.
Gabi, who in fact told me their story in their own words, and it was jaw-dropping, but true to Krakowian Jews. And I met more. and I met someone who discovered the idea of hidden Jews, Jews who were raised as the children of Polish Catholics, or children of children whose parents put them with Poles to be saved, and they were raised as Catholics or Christians, and they're discovering their Jewishness and emerging, which I came to learn was one of the functions of the synagogues in Poland, was to receive and accept these Poles who were discovering that they have Jewish roots.
At what point did you then start to, say, shift your perception about, let's say, like the non-Jewish Polish experience, or like your perception of non-Jewish Polish people? Right now we're talking about Jews, and of course the Jews are a really important entry point into Poland. And I would say, I agree with you, or I had a very similar feeling, this kind of the magic of being able to kind of feel and almost like taste or sit in the context of our histories, because of the architecture and the cemeteries and the things that still exist, which is something that we can't do here in Winnipeg. The Jewish community here is not very old, and it's primarily made up of a lot of survivors who moved to Winnipeg. But at what point did you become, say, interested in non-Jewish Poles as well? And at what point did you start to understand that experience, or more about that experience?
It probably wasn't in our first trip. It was Passover, and we had a lot going on to do with that. Getting food that was kosher, suitable for Passover, trying to have as much of a Passover there as we would have here. And it was actually easy. It was delightful. There's kosher food. The home was recently refurbished, and everything was new, so it wasn't a lot of work getting ready for Passover.
For those who don't know, on Passover you have to use a whole different set of dishes that are kosher specifically for Passover, because you're not allowed to have bread during Passover. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, but it's a huge undertaking to prepare a kitchen for Passover. But because this was a brand new kitchen, it could start as a kitchen that was kosher for Passover, and we found that specifically to make it more comfortable for you guys.
Yeah, and you had a friend that came in for a couple of days and koshered the oven and made sure everything. She was an observant, practicing Jew, and we trusted her. I talked to her, and she made a lot of effort into making sure that everything was kosher in the kitchen in the house. So everything was Jewish that first trip. Maybe it was just as well, because it was just talking to Polish Jews, mostly your peers, your friends, your age group, was quite useful. There were others, but they were Polish speaking, and either we weren't ready or we just didn't have the opportunity from either the wedding or the wedding party or the receptions afterwards. It was
it was a pretty whirlwind trip. Lots of events.
pretty Jewish. And I don't think we traveled anywhere.
Yeah.
We just stayed in the city and then left and went home after Passover. We stayed for the entire Passover.
Yeah, and in a way, I think it's good, like the journey for, you know, the kind of Jew you are with the kind of narrative that you have. It's like to kind of get you comfortable with the idea of Poland again, or at all. It helps to have that Jewish entry point, right?
One episode or one event that is that stays with me is meeting Professor Weber, Dr. Weber, and his wife at your wedding in the Stara synagogue, which at the time I didn't realize was itself a special location. We walked through and we saw it was a museum, but we didn't realize how special it was to get permission to have your wedding there. And Dr. Weber made a point of, pulled me over as I was running after the wedding party. That's why I was late. I missed
I
the
remember
walk.
we were all waiting.
You were yelling at me afterwards, saying, "What were you doing?" And I'm talking to this professor who I didn't realize his pedigree and who he was, but he said, "Make sure we do. We visit the Galicia Jewish Museum and the cemetery in just outside of Kazimierz." He was the first person outside of family that I began to talk to.
You came. You had you came for the wedding. You came for Pesach. You had the whole. I don't remember how long you were in Poland. But you started with like, I don't even want to go. You weren't looking forward to it, and then you came, and you had this experience in Poland, and then you came back here to Winnipeg. And what was going on in your brain?
At that time, my perception had changed, and I was curious to know what was the modern, contemporary Poland like, and how was it for the Jews. I remember going to a synagogue, and I asked people in the synagogue, "What's it like? How dangerous is it for the Jew? How safe is it? What can we do?" And one of the lay leaders in the synagogue said, "There's no anti-Semitism. It's banned. There is no anti-Semitism." And he says, "I can walk down the street with my head covering, my kippah, and have absolutely no fear," which was mind-blowing to me because even at that point I was still trying to hide my Jewishness for fear that someone would come out of the hall, the aisle or the lane and attack me. And he says, "No, try it." And I did. I wore my head covering for almost a week throughout the streets of Kazimierz. And that's something that, and absolutely no one even looked at me. No one paid me attention. I couldn't do that in my home city.
Here in Winnipeg?
In Canada.
It's funny, I made a video once talking about how it was ironic that I felt safer in Poland right now than I would, say, in Canada, given the war in Israel. And I had a lot of people, like rightly so, like, why would it be ironic that you feel safe in Poland? Given the fact that Poland was, for the longest time, the best place in the world for the Jews. Like, the Jews were living in Poland because it was safer in Poland for Jews than anywhere else in the world. Of course, that changed after the war, or North America became a safer place for Jews. But I think a lot of Polish people would say that Poland has always been safe for the Jews, and when it stopped being safe for the Jews, it had nothing to do with the Polish people. It was because of the Germans. The Germans were the ones who were occupying Poland. The Germans were the ones who had made it unsafe for Jews. Why should Jews not feel safe in Poland outside of the context of World War II?
During the war, we learned that the Jewish people had to be in hiding, whether it was in the forests or with their own resources to try and stay alive, but the rest were deported to concentration camps or work camps, and most died there. I think, what did I hear? 200,000 survived the concentration camps.
But who was responsible?
Because it was in the country of Poland, I always assumed that the Poles were complicit, and that the Jews had to hide from Poles as well.
And you had no information about the number of Polish people who were righteous among the nation?
Not until later, not until later trips, and I learned that the greatest number of righteous Jews were from Poland.
Righteous Poles.
Righteous Poles, yeah. Right, who did either save or lose their lives trying to save Jews.
And essentially, I'm not saying it because somehow there's something wrong with you or there's a problem. It's very common. It's a very common and interesting perspective. And I think it's interesting for Poles because it's very confusing for Polish people why Jews dislike Poland so much. A lot of people don't understand. And it's also, when you kind of break down the facts, it's interesting to me just how much we blame Polish people for something that was not their fault. It's interesting just how many people assume that Polish people were complicit. Not to say that there were not people who were complicit.
Emotionally, I still wonder about how many Poles really helped Jews. I'm going to say there's an emotional side and an intellectual side. Emotionally, there were 7,500 proven cases of Poles saving Jews and receiving the medallions for righteous Gentile. And even if that number is too low, as some would say, the requirements to receive that recognition and the medallions are very stringent. There has to be firsthand evidence. So even if you say it was double, triple that number, some would say that there are. And there are other organizations I've since learned who are giving rewards other than Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. But what were the rest? What were the rest of the Poles? Why didn't more Poles step up? Mm-hmm. That's the emotional side of me. Intellectually, I've come to understand that the Poles' lives themselves, they were in danger. And they were trying to survive as best they could. But still, there's that question in the back of my head. And I would like to spend more time talking to descendants of that generation and hear the stories of their family and how they survived, got through the war. As I've learned or come to learn, the Poles were considered second-class citizens, maybe just one step better than gypsies, and they themselves were slotted or destined to become slaves or workers for the German people. They weren't worth anything more than that. So that's a difficult thing to get my head around, but I believe it's true. That's how they were described, both in literature. Mm. On the other hand, I have read books. The most recent that I'm waiting for is It's Still Night, or Dale, or It's Still
Dale
Night.
Nuts?
Dale Nuts.
I don't know what the title is.
I think so. Which was edited by Jan Grabowski and Barbara Engelking. and other stories, like survivor stories of people, how they survived, and some on their own, but many with the kindness of non-Jewish Poles.
I don't know if you know, but like you probably remember the trial. There's a very infamous trial where Grabowski and Engelking were put on trial by the former Polish government for like treason because
Yeah,
of
besmirching the good name of Poland.
yeah, and they were let off. Thank goodness. I know a lot of people have problems with Grabowski as a writer. A lot of people feel like he accentuates things, or they feel like he's not an actual. It's hard for me to actually know, right? Because whenever people are writing books that defames Polish people, they're going to not like it. They're not going to like it. And I understand the perspective that Polish people have, because it's like God, like we suffered Poles suffered too, and no one gave a shit. And there was 40 years of communism where they weren't even allowed to negotiate the fact that they had suffered, while at the same time, like, Jews were starting to, well, Jews got Israel, Poles got communism, and Jews, the Holocaust narrative was starting to really be told by Jewish people, and Polish people had very little opportunity to do that for themselves. Then communism finally ended, and suddenly, like, the only really loud conversations that are happening about Poland are the ones that Jan Gross started with Neighbors, and then Grabowski and Engelking, like people who are basically shitting on Poles for the places where they were culprits during the war. And like, no one's talking about the other stuff on a kind of global scale. And people say that Grabowski's not he's not a historian, that he's not actually a historian. And so and again, like, this is not me saying that I'm against Grabowski. We're Facebook friends.
I mean, why do you say that? The large work that the most recent work that he did, is a work of documented history. He did travel, and he did investigate cases, stories of the Blue Police. You're right that he omits two things. He omits talking about saving Jews, or where there was some good. I think he says in his work that's not his job, that's not his place. And he also forgets to say a very important philosophy, which I think is worldwide, but we call it a Jewish piece of philosophy, that the sins of the father do not travel to the children. The father can be the worst beast, murdering creature there, but the children are still innocent, and they are to be judged on their own merits. And I guess that's my hope, that there is a new theme.
The one thing I would just say that, like, the stuff about the sins of the father are not necessarily the sins of the child. I would say that this is a kind of this something that for me I think applies and is more important to apply to Germans than Poles per se, because I feel like for Polish people, and of course, if there is a Polish person whose ancestors did do something bad to Jewish people, then yes, absolutely. Whereas in Germany, everyone's got a Nazi in their family. But in Poland, like, the majority of Polish people did not do things to harm Jewish people. The majority just did nothing. And it's a question of if we consider that to be a sin. Which,
Crimes by omission.
but like, what would you do? Okay, let's say you you someone came in and the indigenous people of Canada were being hunted, and let's say me and Sarah.
It was them or me.
Yeah. Like, would you risk your life to hide someone, knowing that, like, your young children could be murdered if you were caught? I mean, I think it's a difficult question to answer.
It's an existential question.
It's a very difficult question to answer, right?
Yeah.
But I think this is the question that every single Polish person was faced with, right? Like, would you risk your life to save this other? I would hope that I would, but I'm not sure. Like, if I knew that my son could be murdered, if I was caught saving someone, it's a really, and so to sort of say, oh, this is a sin to not do it, to choose your family over trying to save somebody else. I think it's hard. I think it's hard to pass judgment on that. I think it's very hard to say this, that that's a sin. By the not doing it was a sin. I think that probably a lot more people wish they could have done more. I think that an interesting thing happened during right now with Ukrainian people, where I think a lot of Polish people really stepped up, and Polish people really did amazing things with Ukrainian people in a way that was surprising for all of, even Polish people. Everyone's like, we can't believe everyone's helping. Everyone is helping. And there have been some thoughts that, like, part of that might connect to the fact that people wish that Polish people did or could have done more during the Second World War for Jews, but they didn't have that freedom, whereas now there's this freedom that Polish people have to help. Their lives are not in danger, and Polish people did. I think they wanted to show the world, like, this is who Poland is, this is who Polish people are, look at what and I think they made a really strong statement as a result.
I don't think us North Americans realize the extent to which the country was almost, you'd call it, mobilized to look after, to save Ukrainians, as well as raise funds to support the home front, the Guard, the Polish army, sorry, the Ukrainian army, with materials and armaments to go to battle and defend their country. What did I hear at one point? There was up to 3 million Ukrainians.
Yeah, at one point there was as many Ukrainians as there were Jews before the war.
Right. And even in my own city, I'm amazed of the number of Ukrainians that have been taken in. Mind you, they're on a 3-year visa. So the jury is still out on what's going to happen after those expire. But we've done a lot, but nothing compared to what Poland had done and continues to do.
People just aren't reading as much about it. It's like the war hasn't gotten any better. It's just that, everyone's focused on Israel now. Everyone's focused on Israel. Well, like, Ukraine is like, hey, we're still being attacked by Russia. So I would like to sort of sum up sort of where you stand now in relationship to Poland, your feelings about Poland now versus your feelings about Poland, say prior to my wedding, or prior to starting to come, and also, the fact that I now like live there. I've moved there permanently. I'm a citizen of Poland. I have a family in Poland.
I have a grandson in Poland.
How do you feel about all of this stuff?
I'm looking forward to returning, and there's only so much one can absorb in a 2 or 3 week trip. First of all, we have commitments, responsibilities. We have friends now that we want to see, and family. I love the feeling of being immersed in a foreign culture and literally confused, and then all of a sudden understanding comes. So I can't wait to go back, if at all possible. And I'm in a different place at this point. I'm now at the point where, among my friends and peer group, I find myself defending Polish people and Poland, which is unheard of, say, 10 years ago. Some don't want to hear it. Some are like that, like I was. Some I have encouraged, let's go. Let me take you there. Let me show you what exists. It's more than just a cemetery of the Jews. There are Jews who are thriving and living there. Some of them will say, well, how else? Of course you're going to feel that way. Your son has moved there, so of course it's expected that I should feel that way. I've changed. And it's great how it happened, because my beliefs were incomplete, if not wrong.
Cool. It's cool to hear you talk about, like, I can't wait to go back. I can't wait to go back, and you being so grumpy about, me having a wedding there 9 years ago. Now, nice. Okay. So, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. My father, Cary Rubenfeld, straight from Winnipeg. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. If you liked this video and you'd like more content like this, remember to like and subscribe. If you'd really like to support me, I have started a Patreon account, patreon.com/Michael Rubenfeld. Don't you want to make my father proud by supporting me in making this? Wouldn't it make you proud?
We've done it for decades. Now it's their turn.
There you go. So, what are you waiting for? Look at how scary he is. He'll come after you. Yeah. Anyways, thanks a lot, and Chag Sameach, happy Pesach, and Kochamy Polskę. Bye bye.